All right, good morning, everybody. My name's Josh Roberts. I'm the Vice President of Global Ag Development for Taylor Farms. My job is to kind of split between a few different things, but on the technology side, my job is to currently work on harvest automation and robotics in field. Uh, but historically, throughout the farming world, been exposed to a lot of these different weeding platforms, yeah, I'm excited to share real-world challenges and opportunities that I've experienced, and hopefully answer any questions you guys might have.
Danny?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Danny Ramos. I am a farmer with traditionally a lot of row crop experience. From there, I migrated into the permanent crop world, some very large-scale permanent crop operations that we implemented technology, weeding as well. Now, coming from a specialty case scenario, Dave Wilson Nursery, where I'm responsible for the operation. So we're row crop farming trees. So row crop world to permanent crop world to now a combination of the two.
Yeah, excited to get into both these use cases of large vertically integrated grower and then special use case, and your background in permanent crops will be good to get into. So Josh, maybe let's talk a little bit about just the lay of the land, like what crops you're growing, geographies, just kind of an idea on scale, just to kind of understand kind of how you would look at robotic weeding given your situation.
Yeah, so at Taylor Farms, we farm about 45,000 crop acres annually. That represents about 40% or so of our total consumption, depending on how you look at it. And we're split, and my numbers might not be perfect, but we split between conventional organic, about 65% or so on the organic side versus conventional. We grow a lot of baby leaf crops internally, but the bigger thing is that we source a ton of crop from a lot of different growers, and the goal is obviously to land product at the cheapest possible price that we can. And so really interested in technology assisting us with that, and historically, cultivatable crops versus high density crops, it seems like there's several different solutions that we're leveraging for that. But we're a little bit nuanced to some, being a grower processor, is we have a 52-week season, and we're sourcing crops from California, Yuma, central Mexico, and several different regions across the country. And so we have the unique ability to be able to leverage some of these tools year round.
Yeah, so you have kind of a nomadic supply base that moves from Salinas to Huron to Yuma or other areas. So are you typically moving equipment for all those zones, or do you have dedicated equipment at each geography?
Yeah, our internal farming operation is Salinas and Yuma based in Imperial Valley. So that's how we will cross-utilize assets there, specifically on the farming side. Huron, we depend on outside growers. But yeah, that's the key, is to really spread those investments across as much growing area to have the uptime that we need to really make sense on the ROI.
Got it. Danny, maybe give us the lay of the land of Dave Wilson and kind of where you're located, the crops you're growing, and kind of the nursery setup.
Sure. So Dave Wilson Nursery is located in Hickman, California. We farm about 300 acres of high-density trees, 20,000 trees per acre, almonds, all your permanent crop, the starting point of all the permanent crops. It's a very labor-intense business. Right now, we are really looking at ways we could shave our weeding cost, reduce mechanical damage from weeding, and really attack that. That's the easy win. It's such a labor-intense business in the field that there's some things we can't eliminate, such as grafting and all the other intricate things that occur. But weeding is one that we believe the solutions exist today. It's just taking what's on the market, modifying it, and adapting it to our row crop setting.
Gotcha. All right, let's talk a little bit about effectiveness. The FIRA show's been around for like 4 or 5 years now, so the technology's been out there starting to scale. Like what's working for you, Josh? Like what companies or technologies are you working? We've there's laser, there's see and spray, there's mechanical. Talk to us about kind of your approach of what you're actually commercially using right now.
Yeah, so again, I have kind of a different experience, probably just being a grower and coming back to Taylor as more of a liaison. But my experience is that the laser technology that's existing today with carbon is superior as far as high density crops. So carrots, baby leaf crops, it's really the most effective strategy, I think, for weeding those aside from human interaction. Really clean ROI on that. We acquired, I'm sure a lot of people know, FarmWise last year or earlier in the year as a mechanical weeding solution. It's a comparable solution to Stout. I've used both. I think they're both really robust in the space as far as mechanical interaction and weeding. Really similar actuation function and ground interaction. We were talking earlier ahead of the meeting, though, that it really different systems are going to require different process controls on the farm, and so it really exposes when you mechanically interact with the soil. In my opinion, it really exposes any shortcomings or ground-related prep issues that might be there. So I think that's an opportunity for improvement that doesn't have anything to do with the strategy, but it does put a lot more pressure on prep. Whereas a laser or a chemical interaction won't have as much, won't affect it as much. Then on the chemical side, I have some experience with a lot more with Verdant specifically, just having worked with those guys for a lot of years now. I think it's a great piece of technology, and then it does appear, if you speak on the back of the FIRA question, coming to this event for a few years now, that the chemical side is getting more and more, there's a lot more opportunities there, and that technology is constantly evolving. So I'm excited to see that. It looks like everybody is taking a step forward with progress, with cheaper hardware in the technology and better compute with the GPUs, and a lot more solid state applications where we're seeing speed improvements, we're seeing weight reductions, we're seeing more accuracy. Those demos yesterday were pretty obvious in that. Or if you've been coming to this for a few years, or if you've been involved in this space, which I'm assuming most people have, that's the exciting thing, is that early adopters, a lot of the pain points that you have to work through seeing that product out in the ranch is, hey, it's really great, but we're going too slow, and uptime is key. So I can't afford to buy 5, but I need to cover a lot more acres. Now we're seeing everyone, whether it's carbon, FarmWise on our end, and Stout, and then Verdant, Eco Robotics, Nico, they're all moving faster, sometimes orders of magnitude faster through the field. So coverage is really picking up, which really gives, I think, a grower that's bootstrapped the ability to invest. Because that's a challenge, right? We're in somewhat of a recession right now, and you're really trying to figure out, what are we going to do? Where are we going to invest our money? And if you can cover a lot more acres in a condensed amount of time, you can get that payback faster. So.
And does your approach differ, conventional versus organic? You mentioned a pretty good split between the two, in terms of tools in the toolkit for weeding. How do you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty obvious. On the organic side, you have less tools. And so my thoughts have always been, and our thoughts have always been, is apply the use case, or apply the tool to the best use case. And so on the organic side, you really only have labor as your alternative, whereas we have a lot of chemical options on the conventional side, although they're less and less effective. And so I really think it's just value back and really matching up your labor strategy with the technology. I think now that we have a lot more years of experience with a lot of these suppliers and companies, is that you can now actually not hire the labor because you trust the tools that are on the market. And I think that's great.
All right, Danny, we'll jump to you. How are things going on your end in terms of adopting the technology? What are you currently doing for weeding, and what are you looking to invest in?
Currently, we are looking at Verdant See and Spray as the weeding system of choice for high density row crop farming of trees, right? For several reasons. Like a lot of things, machine access is critical. Crop canopies, row spacings, and some in weight and things of that nature. So I believe different weeding solutions serve a better purpose for different commodities and situations. What we're trying to do at the nursery, we're also trying to collect data. So having an intelligent sprayer that could someday tell us where these weed species, map those for us. Maybe working with that team, highly confident they could also do some other things going through the field, such as maybe we could be measuring our tree caliper as we go through the field. So, you know, betting on that system for this application lends itself to being able to do a lot more things down the road. Something I've really tried to build on when I'm building farms is let's try to farm with data and not memories and feelings. And so everything we do, if we can be mapping this, most of it exists today, but there's some critical pieces. You know, for us, it's not really yield, but in traditional row crop or permanent crop, if we can't map yield, you know, you lose sight of things, right? You know, coming from the almond industry, it was hard to map yield in a yield map per acre. Here, we have a known stand, but what we need to map is our caliper trunk thickness, because that's what we get paid on by different thicknesses. So we think Verdant is going to be able to be a really great tool for us to suppress labor, map weed species, measure the trunks of the trees and the calipers, and then, you know, maybe longer term too, we could figure out ways to sucker the trees. So it's got extreme accuracy. It's also great for the environment, not a lot of chemical use. So all those things are kind of why we're doing what we're doing. Some of the things, you know, to touch a little bit what Josh said too is, you know, adopting these things, we have to have the end in mind, what we're coming in with. And that's general common sense in farming. What we've done prior to the prior pass or passes leading up to what we're trying to implement have a high impact on if we're going to be successful or not. So it's knowing all those things. You know, when you're row crop farming, we got to have our GPS right, our guess rows right, our beds equal, our soil tilth right to set up the mechanical weeders to thrive, right? And so it's learning all those things that are critical to the success of adopting the technology.
That makes sense. Can you talk us through kind of the operational differences of your use case, like for annual vegetables, we're going in with weeders, you know, typically a couple weeks after planting to get the small weeds. When you're growing trees, I'd imagine like you maybe get like a 1-year use and then you're replanting new trees, because I'd imagine like the height of the tree gets to a certain level where you can't get through with a Verdant or a robotic weeder.
Yeah, so the tree canopy is a unique challenge because some products are 1-year products, some are 2, and they get up to 6 feet tall. So very challenging to mechanize and do multi-row. So right now we're trying to go small and go down the center. We're on 60-inch spacing, so very small, very compact, and not multi-row, right? That's the game in the permanent crop bare root nursery. You know, in some of the other experiences I've had in the permanent crops, you know, see and spray work well on young almond orchards that you're establishing when they got a lot of sunlight and the weed pressures are extreme. You know, the payback savings on material and efficiency are those young years in orchard establishment. That's where the biggest ROI is. Later on, when the canopy gets big and shading out and there's less pressure, you know, it's a little harder.
Let's talk a little bit about ROI and kind of cost. Josh, you mentioned a lot of companies in the space, and I think that's a good thing for the industry where there's a lot of tools in the toolkit, and competition is a good thing for everyone and farmers involved. So maybe talk to us about how you think about like doing an ROI analysis on making an investment on whatever technology you're looking at.
Yeah, I mean ROI is ROI. So I think it's simple math. I think you've got to really take into consideration the fringe. So earlier I was talking about labor, and so if you're a smaller farm, or even a larger farm, you have a labor component no matter what. It's going to do something that the machines can't do at all. So you really have to make sure that you're calculating in that carry cost of labor if you're going to have them, because whether it's H2A or it's domestic, you're going to commit to some sort of labor strategy. So that plays in, and then just uptime, right? So how many hours can you run the equipment? Does it require maintenance during the day? Most of them don't, but what does that look like? Is it mobile? Can you load it up and move it? Can you road it? Can you drive? Can you build a plan ahead of that? But I think it's really important to be critical of your ROI calculation ahead of time, and really leverage, not only the folks selling the equipment, because they have a lot of experience with different farms, but really spend a lot of time, and then probably buffer that or yield that out a little bit of a factor, just until you get some real life experience. Because the reality is that rarely, unless you have a season or two behind you, is it going to be an accurate ROI. It's probably in some cases extremely better than planned. And then in most others, you're going to have some nuance that's going to kick you out. You're going to have some rain. If you're a mechanical weeding solution, there's not every field's going to be ready. It may have been irrigated off cycle, or you could have had a leak in the field, and you might have to bring a hand crew in. If you're thinning, for example, sometimes there's border cases where the edges don't get thinned, and you have to bring a crew, or you don't have to, but that's a choice that affects yield. And then in that ROI, it's important to kind of be progressive in your thoughts of how you can improve or accommodate the technology and actually reduce cost in your farm system. So perhaps you're overplanting to achieve a tighter stand on lettuces because you've always done that, and seed costs are going up, and fusarium resistant seeds are going up even more. And maybe you get more comfortable with the technology and you see a double benefit that you need to input into your ROI calculator as far as seed savings and a better accuracy with your spray strategy. And I think as the technology is getting better, you can get closer to the plant, or you have a technology that was just weeding but now can thin, right? And so it's really that stair step, in my opinion, of how you get that advantage in that ROI, and it's really important to check that. I encourage anybody that really gets into these technologies to not trust what's advertised, but then also be really critical initially, and allocate a resource in your operation, if possible, or do it yourself, of kind of auditing those costs on a lot by lot basis. I think it'll be really important for you to do that, and you'll gain trust, and most likely you'll want to invest more, but it's a very basic calculator. You know what your standards are. You've been farming this way for perhaps generations, and your weeding costs are tied to a trend line of labor, especially in California, that are pretty straight up, right? And so the earlier you get in my opinion, the longer you save. And yes, technology will become antiquated and obsolete, but it will still work at the benchmark that it was when you started. And I don't see the industry that I work in revolutionizing over the next decade. I think it'll incrementally change as more and more price pressure is put on our system. And so I think it's really important to do that early, and to lean on Western growers and different folks that are in the industry that are providing those services, in my opinion.
Yeah, those are all good points. Danny, what about you? Are you still in demo mode? Have you made an investment in a particular robotic weeder? How do you think about ROI for your situation?
Let's see here. ROI for as we're in development mode right now with Verdant for the tree nursery, but it's a really safe bet because our weeding costs are very high, and our damage that occurs sometime with mechanically weeding and disease getting into the trees is high. So it's a very easy calculation. We spend a lot of money on labor weeding. And so we're very hopeful that this is going to fix a lot of those things, and we get all those other indirect benefits. Getting people out of the field, we have to do so much to the field. It's hard to coordinate windows of time for the people to be in the field a long time because we're irrigating, we're spraying a lot. So I think you got to consider everything too. Like as farmers, we're trying to achieve consistency. Everything we're doing is consistency and uniformity through the field, right? And so getting weeds out early, all all of these things add up to consistency. So the way I think about ROI is just I'm not comparing my machine a direct offset to labor. Am I going to have can I expect any yield improvements or seed reduction costs or anything like that along the way? It was well said by you, Josh. And so looking at everything. The other thing I try to really do to hedge my bet is what else can I do during this pass? So in most cases, I'm trying to do multiple activities, pin it on, if I'm going to do a see and spray in a permanent crop setting, can I tack on my see and spray on my tractor and do all my other cultural farming cultivation practices at the same time? And so theoretically, I get my operational passes are free, and then when you're a large scale farmer and you're having to move stuff all around, the valley, now I'm only moving one thing, right? So my transportation cost goes down. So when you start adding it all up, the ROI comes from transportation costs, elimination of passes through the field, and that's where it really starts to get easier to justify when you're gunning to be an early adopter, right, and land in a safe zone.
Totally. Want to talk about kind of business model, like there's been a big kind of move where it's sales, people buying units of machines, where I think there's an opportunity probably for a service model as well. Obviously, the Taylor acquisition of FarmWise, I think you guys are making a push in the Salinas Valley to offer these tools as a service, and I think that's a really interesting new market to tap into, where there might be growers that have 500 acres, a couple fields of a certain crop where it doesn't make sense for them to buy a machine outright, but if there's an opportunity to pay a fixed price per acre to get that field weeded, a big opportunity. So maybe talk to us about kind of the opportunity you see in offering these things as a service.
Yeah, I think the service model, it's been there's a lot of iterations of service models. I think the most robust service model that we all are probably aware of is a chemical application company, right? That model seems to work. We're very dependent on it in the Salinas Valley and slightly less in Yuma. But I think the service model from a Taylor Farms perspective is a unique opportunity for us to leverage our scale and capital opportunity to allow growers to interact with some of these technologies earlier. It gives us an ability to get across more acres and potentially scale costs down. The other thing, there's been failures too, right? With the service model, FarmWise is a great example. They started off as a service and pivoted to an implement and abandoned the service model because service is challenging in respect to logistics and efficiency planning. I think so. The strategy of doing that and what we're trying to do is really make sure that we can get out in front of it with growers that we know will use the product, plan for them and with them, and really tie it to a planning schedule that we support, but not only offer it to the Taylor product. I think long term that'll be a continued strategy of ours to leverage different technologies and potentially different vendors. The other benefit for us, what we're thinking about long term is to your point, Danny, on the data side. Everything that comes through, we forecast, right? So we bomb plan. We don't plant any more than 100% and any less than 100% of what our forecasted demand is through our salad factories, right? And so for us, a lot of our growing strategy is we pay growers on a per acre basis, and we pay on a confirmed stand. So if a grower is growing for Taylor Farms and we can get across that field several different times and have access to plant populations, plant health, uniformity, not only can we understand what our predicted yield's going to be against our standard, is we can also understand and predict when that crop's probably going to harvest and if there's going to be a disparity in uniformity, and bring that into not only our forecast planning tool but also our ERP, and really put a dollar and cent to that. And the goal of that would be to drive costs down and to be able to pay our growers more. And I know that's theoretical today, but that would be the goal. And a lot of you guys out there that I've talked to for a long time, and they're supporters in this technology space, we've always talked about data, and there's a differential of opinion, I think, in this world of some folks think that the data is worthless because it's so much information. I think it's incumbent upon everybody to really understand the value chain and the direction of that data, and also have a back of mind thought of where that IP control is. But for us, as being a large processor, we see value long term of having access to that, considering we own those crops at germination. And so that's us, and I think you could turn that back around to the grower and give them intelligible data to drive their decisions forward. Maybe it's spot application with a variable rate fertilizer. Maybe it's a variety change, and layers that kind of get you out of that. We did it this way last time, and rinse and repeat, and really affect change. Because driving yield up is the only way we can compete with driving costs up in California.
Yeah, I think that's a super good point, and an opportunity for companies that are vertically integrated that have a network of outside growers that are oftentimes providing, custom transplant or custom harvesting to offer, like, hey, we'll plant your crop and come back 2 weeks later and run through and weed it for a fee and take that out of the settlement. So for smaller growers, like really good on cash flow, where they can get that kind of taken out of a settlement and not have to outlay the cash during the growing season cash crunch.
Yeah, I just want to add too, I think the other thing that's going to add to success of a service model, whether it's us doing it or anybody else, is we've got to break out of the understanding what the hand crew cost is and just discounting it slightly as a strategy and a come to market. We've got to really understand what the cost of running the technology is, and then build a margin off of that. I think that's the only way we move this gimbal forward, to allow growers and anybody else that's interacting with technology to reinvest. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves in this stagnation of technology or adoption, because we won't move the gimbal enough to really reinvest enough money to drive change, in my opinion.
Totally. Danny, what do you think about kind of service model opportunities? Obviously, the nursery is a little bit of a different situation, and maybe your experience in permanent crops. How do you think about that opportunity?
The service model, I think, is great, and I think it's essential in the early stages of technology. It shaves off the learning curve. It gives people confidence, and it allows growers who can't quite afford, who don't have enough scale to maybe afford this technology when it's expensive, to be able to utilize and capitalize on it and grow higher yields, cleaner fields with better cost, right? So in the early stages, it's great. It would really help advance the industry if there are guys out there charging the way, getting exposure and experience through different conditions and really testing the stuff. The other thing it does is it tests it faster. We get a lot more acres and throughput through the machines to know where the failure points are going to be. We just learn faster by running them hard for longer periods of time.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we've talked about the technology is working, there's ROI there. Let's talk about ease of implementation, where you have this really cool piece of equipment. How is that at the farm level, Josh, of like putting an operator in a machine and he's operating a piece of equipment that maybe he hasn't seen before? How do you kind of approach that as an operation?
My philosophy, and I think most people are following the same, is really depend on the technology. So, but really look at it as a department and create a departmental focus on an incremental improvement of the ranch. So it's not a replacement of a cultivator. Look, if you buy a stout cultivator, it's not a replacement of a cultivator exactly. It's a level up, right? And so it requires some interaction incremental to a regular Wasco cultivator. And so in my mind, you're trying to employ or adjust your supervision level management to focus on uptime, to focus on wear and R&M and scheduling that in. But it depends on the technology, right? Like a carbon weeder, in my experience, we put our irrigators in the tractor to drive them, because it did most of the work for you, and we're going slow. And then we put our skilled engineer type focus guys, they walked behind the machine and really understood the strategy and dynamically, and we're trying to make sure that we were putting the machine in the right field. But something more complicated like a mechanical weeder or a sprayer, in my opinion, you're leveraging the folks that are most competent in that specific space. So chemical, mechanical, and highly technical. But the driving part isn't the hardest part anymore. It's understanding, are you in the right field at the right time? Are you operating at the right speed? Are you setting it up at the proper configuration? And so it puts a little bit more pressure, I'd say, on your traditional mid-level management of the farm initially, but it becomes second nature very quickly. Just like, in my opinion, it's like switching from a regular manual-driven tractor to a GPS steering. It's a little bit of work. You're sitting in the buddy seat for a couple days, making sure that they set the AB lines, and you spend a little bit of time programming the user interface and all that stuff. But once that work's done, the telematic reporting and all the value that comes back into the office starts to drive a lot more confidence on the farm, and you're really just checking in. So the integration timing, I think, it varies slightly, but it's relatively simple in most cases.
Danny, what about you? How's the implementation been going on Verdant and your past experience on almonds and tree nuts?
The learning curve is steep in the beginning on a lot of these things. So first and foremost, you got to have patience, not set the expectations too high, do a very rigorous training program. My kind of strategy is you need to be able to do everything you're responsible for. So top down needs to understand this, so there's enough help surrounded these people, the operators. But the operators are smart. They all have devices nowadays, and it's not extremely challenging, but just making every effort that you can to set it up for success. That way, when you are in the field, you're experiencing the uptime and ROI and everything. But you do have to go out there and do some. I like to do real live simulations of everything and prove we could do before we show up to the field.
That makes sense. Guys, I want to take a step back and just kind of get into a high-level view of how you think adoption for robotic weeding is going in general. Like when I drive through the Salinas Valley, I see it pretty frequently from the highway, and like when I'm in the Central Valley near our family's farm, like don't see a ton of it commercialized. Like, where do you think we're at as an industry in terms of like seeing mass adoption, commercialization of this stuff?
I tend to agree, but I think it's commodity driven, right? If I'm farming cotton, there's plenty of solutions that I don't need that technology. I could weed it pretty efficiently with a very cheap Lillison, Wasco, Alloway, whatever your choice is, right? High value commodities is where high density and high value commodities, that it's more, you could afford it more there, right? I mean, if it was really cheap, maybe you could afford it in some of these other lower value commodities.
I emulate that. I think the other thing is that the word commodity is important, right? So historically, tomatoes, cotton, corn, soy, they're commoditized, right? So the price has been very low for a long time, and so growers have had to come up with these solutions a long time ago. In specialty produce and high value crops, the markets have been high escalated, and margins have been decent for a long period of time, and so we've been able to kind of depend on our old ways. And so I think that's probably a huge part of it. And then just the ability to react. It takes a lot more acres of corn and cotton and tomatoes to pay for one of these pieces of equipment. I'm really happy to see that Verdant and Eco Carbon, everybody's coming up with wider offerings to really jump into that. I think with John Deere's acquisitions of Blue River and a few other folks, the thought is in See and Spray, that's going to be for open commodity field crops. And so it's really just a decision of time, but I think the specialty crops and lettuce crops in Salinas, you're seeing a lot more adoption. You can also, it's also a very condensed space where you have multiple farming operations running really close to each other compared to the San Joaquin, where you've got larger operations, so you might not see as many, although they're there. I think that's an interesting nuance, though, and there's probably a lot of redundant purchasing that's happening because everybody wants to run their equipment when they want to run their equipment. So that's just the way it works, and we're very much an on-time crop, being anywhere from 18-day arugula to 150-day carrots. So I think that's something to really consider too. But again, nobody would be buying them if there wasn't a real ROI.
Cool. And we'll do one last question, then maybe open it up for some questions. But I'm sure you get a lot of knocks on the door of companies looking to get in the door. Obviously, Taylor's a big name. Dave Wilson's a big name of looking for technology. So, what's one piece of advice you would give for kind of an up and coming, like early stage company looking to get your interest?
I mean, thoroughly vet the technology, do your own research, do your part in setting it up for success. And another thing is, if there's partners in the industry, a lot of times when we would, you know, be an early adopter of a specific technology, you know, kind of my strategy was see who can I get to become a dealer or a service support team to help me be successful in this. And so, you know, when we were early adopting weed seeking technology for permanent crops, is okay, I'm going to find somebody like Precision Ag Solutions who is in this technology game already. They add this element to their service, and now they're up and down the valley, the same place where I am, and could be of service and bail us out when things aren't going well. So, you know, getting support all around, and never going. The other advice is never cut too many people out of the equation up front. You know, humans still need to be around to do certain things and process data, and a lot of times too, you know, the back end is, yes, we map all these things, but you know, it takes humans to go make sense of the data. If you're not going to go and commit to those things too, you don't get all the value you can extract out of these things.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Yeah. So if you're going to come up with a technology, I think it's really important to find grower competency that's willing to be transparent enough, not only to be critical, but to drive success through that. Too often do you find critical growers who just say, "Hey, bring me it when it's ready." That'll never work. We'll never make change. But I have some examples that in my experience that I've worked through. Three come to mind. So that the first one is Curtis Gardner with Verdant. We tried Verdant. We had Verdant on the ranch very early. We burned some crops, and you have to accept that, and you have to work through it. And we saw the progress and change, but they're there every step of the way, and never say no, and understand when tempers flare, it's real, because growers are passionate people, and we care about our babies, which are our crops. But they're there. Stout, Jeff Annell. We bought a stout. Stout was TNA only for a little while. Everybody, like, what's going on? So we bought one, and 2 a.m., 2 in the afternoon, not only did Jeff answer the phone, but he came to the field, and he stood there, and he helped us work through hydraulic challenges, and really became a part of our team. And you know, if I had at the time more money, I would have bought 5 more, just because of that relationship. And because relationships are everything in what we do, and trust is everything in what we do. And then the carbon relationship is interesting for us because I very early adopter of that technology, and I saw it on YouTube and called Paul and said, "Hey, like, come to Salinas, right? Like we want to see this," and we wanted it faster than they could produce it for us, because we were dying at the vine with $2,000, $2,500 weeding bills and organic baby leaf to a processor, to Taylor Farms. I was a grower for Taylor Farms, and we were, you know, there's no way to stay alive in that world because of purslane, and so we were hungry, like desperate, and so they really demonstrated that lean-in strategy of building it as fast as they can, but doing it in a concise fashion, and then that deployment support. You know, the technology is one thing. You could have the most novel, robust technology, but if you don't commit to the deployment and really that lockstep approach with the grower and adopters all the way through, you'll never be successful. And Carbon's really demonstrated how well that's gone. And I you know, whether it's one, I had number 5 and number 7 weeder, and I think you've sold 70 now, or maybe 170. I don't know, but however many they've sold, that approach continues, and I think that's really important. Being a non-OEM, right? Like you're not John Deere, you're not. There's a lot of value that RDO brings to the equation with all their service trucks, and if you have to figure out how to do that, price it into your world, be willing to kind of forego margin, because I'm assuming there's no money made for a little while, but word of mouth is so strong in what we do that it creates this kinetic energy that can't stop. So you're seeing it now. You have multiple see and spray weeders, you have multiple thinning, and people are now able to make a decision. No different than green, blue, red, right? Like orange. They're making those decisions based on multiple scenarios. The capability of the equipment, right? But the service, the relationship, and where are they going to be? What's the company health going to be in 10 years? Because that's scary. Most startups will fail. It's just statistics, right? And so, and the reality is a lot of startups will end up being sold or go public. And so you've got to really understand, like, where are we going? And that's built on trust, because they can tell you whatever they want, but you've got to see through that and make a decision that's going to keep you whole so that you don't have it sitting in the boneyard non-supported.
Okay, we have time for a couple of questions. We want to give our smart tech there a lot of time. You guys need headsets for the questions. Anybody have, okay, just a couple of questions. Here we go.
Tom Beach from Autonomous Agri Solutions. We're a robot as a service provider in the UK and European markets. Where we've had really good success is where we've been able to clearly program our work with our partner growers that we work with, because the risk is two-way. We need to perform the work, but we also need to have the confidence that the work is there for us. Can you say something to what a model would look like that would work best for you as farmers and growers to deliver a service model that really works?
Again, it's weird to hear yourself now. I think the service model and approach needs to be built on the foundation of the plan. So I think the meeting with the grower initially is, how big are you as a farmer? How much are you willing to commit to technology and get onto a contract structure that's acres per week? And then I think there needs to be a mutual commitment, similar to any contract, that whether a side acts of God's aside, you're going to commit whether the grower's ready or not for that. And I think that's going to be an interesting interaction, because I think if you're until it's built out and developed, if you're not scaled, that service will fail. So you need the similar adoption to buying the technology through the service. But I do think if the strategy's robust enough and you plan ahead to scale the acreage to the bandwidth of the technology, and you keep the margin down, you should be super successful.
Okay, one more question. One more right here.
Hi, Matt McReynolds, Bayer Crop Science Research and Development. So thank you for sharing your experience and utilizing these exciting technologies. So when developing new hybrid varieties, the needs for crop R&D teams can differ from what the real world weed control approach will be for a commercial grower. So based on your experience, if these technologies were applied to research-sized plots, how would you rank the current robotic weeding options for traditional row crops such as soy, wheat, and oilseed varieties from purely an efficacy perspective?
Well, I guess it is weird hearing yourself. I guess it depends on the commodity, soy, corn, whatever you're researching. In the ease of access, we got to select the right technology. You could go overkill, and overkill might not be needed for an easy row crop scenario. So something like FarmWise or Stout probably works really well outside the seed line. Once you get into the seed line, some of the other things is stacking these technologies together to be more efficient. If we go with a sharpshooter down the seed line, we can go fast, and you could use the mechanical solution on the shoulder. So maybe that's where it's at for research. Research is a lot more value than your commodities. So that'd probably be my approach: is hit the seed line with an intelligent weeder and hit the shoulders with a mechanical one, and you maximize speed that way.
Great. Let's thank our panel for a great presentation. Thanks, you guys.